You know, one of the things that we're looking at this year for our year ahead and beyond is that we would be the kind of church that is really outward focused. And it's awesome to see God do things here in our body, but it was never meant to just be here in this room. It's always been meant to carry it out. Yeah, we have good news. Not always been presented that way, but it really is. We have good news that Jesus came to the world so that we could have life, that we could have it abundantly. That is good news. And yet, it's interesting, the news doesn't get out as much as we'd like it to, and when it does get out, it's kind of like we'd like it to go back in. The way that it's presented sometimes is less than tasty. It's kind of, it can also often be kind of repulsive. Even the other day I was at a football game, and every year, I think I mentioned this, every year, a guy goes by with a blowhorn telling everybody how they need to repent and go, or they're going to hell. And I cringe. I cringe because I'm there with non-Christians, and they know I'm a Christian. And I cringe because I don't want to be associated. Sometimes, actually, this time I looked at one of the guys and I said, you know what, I sometimes don't want to call myself a Christian because that's not me. And he said, I know. I was reading an article this week. It was a study that was conducted by Lifeway Research, and they found that 80% of those who attend church one or more times a month believe they have a personal responsibility to share their faith. But 61% have not told another person about how to become a Christian in the previous 6 months. He says that there was a focus in this study on the measuring of spiritual maturity in individuals, and overall, they found that 8 biblical attributes are consistently evident in the lives of maturing believers. Of those 8, sharing Christ is the lowest average score among the Protestant church. The survey asked how many times they personally invited an unchurched person to attend a church service or another program at your church, i.e. women's breakfast, i.e. DSO. Get a little plug in there. Nearly half, 48% of church attendees responded 0. 33% of people say they've personally invited someone 1 or 2 times, and 19% say they've done so on 3 or more occasions in the last 6 months. So we're looking at one of the most important things for us is that people hear good news. And yet, if you're like me, sometimes you're a little hesitant about sharing it. And so we tend, and I have tended to make this my Christian life. And yet, we've been commissioned to go. There are probably a few reasons why we don't do it. Some people have told me I'm not really comfortable with the amount of biblical knowledge that I have. Another reason that we may not do it is that we really don't understand what the gospel is all about. We've come to him and we know that we've been changed by him, but we really can't explain how that's happened. My personal experience, having been raised in the church, was I began to see it as this duty that I had to do. And the only examples that I had to follow were programs that didn't seem very genuine, or some weird things that people do out there, and so it kind of kept me from it. And then I found that as I went to college, I kind of got into this Christian bubble, and I was mainly with Christians, associated with Christians, all my time with Christians, and then I got out of college and I went to as a youth pastor. So I'm now with a youth pastor, and I remember this experience I had. Kelly and I actually had it really early in our marriage because at that time we knew everything about marriage. And I was asked by one of the girls in my youth group if I would be willing to go to UCI to a class there and talk about Christian marriage. And yeah, Mercy is right. It was horrible. I think Teresa in that class? Teresa Crabb was actually in that class. And so here are Kelly and I, newly married, up there talking about Christian marriage, and the things that people began to say, I don't remember them specifically. I began to think, are you kidding me? Is that what people think? Seriously? People? It was like I had no clue what people outside of the church actually thought and believed. I just had no clue. And so it struck me that I've really lost touch with quote-unquote reality. And so for me, I was struck by the fact that I had really removed myself from areas that were from things that were not in the church. And I used to think of this one verse. I remember this verse kept coming to mind, and I didn't look it up to see where it was, but it was, be not deceived, evil communication corrupts good morals. So that was my justification for not going out there. I'm not going to get corrupted. And you know what, honestly, I think that's a lot of us. We tend to isolate ourselves so we don't get corrupted by the world, don't we? We tend to form this little wonderful cocoon that's safe, and I'm not going to get corrupted. So we raise our children, we raise our family. Don't, because that will get on you. Don't let any of that get on you. And that's kind of how I was for a very long time. And I really, quite honestly, I didn't understand what witnessing was all about. I didn't. I didn't know how to do it. It was like I'd go out and I was very ineffective. I try to tell people about the Lord, but here's what it felt like to me. Honestly, I remember one year I lived on my own after high school here in Santa Ana, and I remember meeting this really neat guy, really nice guy. He was a pilot for American Airlines. And man, we were out at like a fast food store, and when I'm eating, and we're talking, and it's like, I like this guy. This guy's like one of the most friendly guys in the world. I've never met someone like this. And he says to me, he says, hey, let's do this again. I'm going, yeah. He says, how about I come over, I meet you at your place, and we get together and we just have something to eat and we chat. And I go, I'd love it. So the night came where he met me at my place, and he's carrying a briefcase, and he walks into my little apartment, and we start to talk, and he says, can I share something with you? And I go, sure. He says, the mind is like a parachute. It does no good unless it's open. I'll never forget that, because he wanted to share with me Amway. Amway. It's like, wait a minute. I thought you were just a nice guy that wanted to get to know me, but he had an ulterior motive. He wanted me to sell Amway for him. I think that's how we are as Christians sometimes. We have this ulterior motive. We want them to accept Christ, so we act very friendly, and then, bam, let's get them with it. Okay, let's get them to say the sinner's prayer, and let's get them in. And so that's kind of been my experience. I've kind of been an Amway salesman. You get to know them so that you can get them saved. And that's not all bad. Actually, there's some good stuff in there. But having an ulterior motive is not really the best way to go about sharing the gospel. And so today I wanted to talk to you a little about how we can go about it. Really, it's kind of sharing the gospel for dummies. If I were to write that book, it would be everything that I know about it. And that's not a whole lot, sometimes I feel. I've been going through a study on my personal life in the Sermon on the Mount. And I've come here a couple times and just kind of shared little pieces of what I feel like I've been learning with you. And I want to continue in that today. We've looked at how Jesus, at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, was healing everybody, and how he then sat down and he began to teach. He kind of changed the focus of what was going on. And then he went through the Beatitudes, and we looked at just a couple of those. And really the Beatitudes are Christian character that he's describing. In following him, this is the person that you will become. The Beatitudes are not a list of things that we do to gain God's favor. They're really a description of what our lives look like when God is in control. And so he goes from describing really Christian character, and then he begins to talk about how our Christian character will impact and influence people. And that's what I want to look at this morning, Matthew 5:13 and 14. And it says this, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." Actually, that's the only verse I'm going to talk on this morning. You are the salt of the earth. Christian character has an influence on a community. And here's how Jesus likens it. He likens it to salt. He says, you are tasty to people. You are the salt of the earth. When I think about salt, I think about flavor. One of the first things I do when I get to a restaurant and I sit down is I look for the salt shaker. Okay, I do. It's like, it's got to have a salt shaker. If it doesn't, I'm going to find another seat. And one of the first things I do when my food comes, which they say you're not supposed to do, you're supposed to taste it first, I salt it. I love salt. When I make popcorn, I put lots of salt. There's something about salt for me that just makes things taste good. I love salt. And see, I think that's what Jesus is saying about us. You are the salt of the earth. When people see you, they should fall in love with you. They should want to be around you. They should look for you when they enter a room, like I look for a salt shaker when I go to a table. They should. It's like, where are they? Why? Because when I'm with them, they taste so good. See, that's what Jesus is saying. When he's saying that you're the salt of the earth, he's saying you are this amazing heavenly flavoring wherever you are. That's what the salt of the earth is. And yet I think that most people do not experience us that way. I think when you walk into a room, do you experience people wanting to come over and talk to you, or do you experience things like, I just remembered, I gotta go take the dog out for a walk, and they leave? What do they experience when they experience you? Is it salty? Is it flavorful? Is it something they want more and more of? Or is it something they want to avoid? And I think for a long time, for many reasons, I wish it weren't true, people avoid church people. It's one of the reasons they don't come to church, because they avoid us. It's not that people reject Jesus, they reject his representation. They may reject his message, but they won't reject him. If you look at his life, everywhere he went, he was the guy everyone wants to be with. Everybody. It didn't matter who you are, whether you were actually a Pharisee, a very religious person, or a prostitute, or a tax collector. It didn't matter. You wanted to be with him. Why? Because when you were with him, there was something about him that you liked. Yes, you are the salt of the earth. But he goes on to say, but if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? He says, actually, if you don't act as salt, you're good for nothing. That's what he says. It's no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet, which is what happens so often. We are salt. Think of yourself as this tasty person who is out there, that when people see you, how do they respond? You're the salt. You're the flavoring that they like. And so, you taste good. People should be looking forward to seeing you enter the room. But Jesus says if you lose your savor, if you lose your flavor, you're no longer good for much. Consider today how the world reacts to much of the church. We've lost our flavor. What does it look like to be salt of the earth? It's very easy. It looks like love. It looks like love. It looks like literally caring for someone. Not because you want them to sell Amway, but because of who they are. When we love people, they respond to it. Have you ever been in a conversation? This is really cool. Try this conversation someday. Ask people questions. Don't talk so much about yourself. Ask them questions. Do you know people love to talk? They love to tell you about them. They want to be heard. They want someone who's interested. And that's one of the places we can begin. Love is just simply saying, I'm placing my interests and putting them aside. I want to be interested in this person. One of the things I like about Carl, one, you know, everywhere Carl goes, he gets to know people. It's crazy to me. Don't ever go someplace with Carl if you want any attention. You won't get it. Because Carl's like salt. It's like everywhere he goes, people love being with him. It's true. I see it time and time and time and time and time and time and time again. Literally everywhere he goes. And he just moved. I hope you're okay with me sharing this. He just moved into an apartment in Huntington. We were talking the other day, and he says, I'm having so much fun, I'm meeting all my neighbors. That's Carl. It's like everywhere he goes, he meets his neighbors. And he just simply loves them. That's it. And that's really what it's about. It's getting out where people are, which we will talk about next week, and loving them. If you want to share the gospel, be the gospel first. Just be the gospel. For God so loved the world. Start there. Quit, if we can, I don't want to sound judgmental. We want to stay away from the world. We want to stay safe from the world. And I will tell you, the Lord will keep you safe. Go out and be there and love them. Love anybody you're with, whether you're in this building or another building or on the street. Start with love. Start by being salt. Remember we looked at Colossians 4, 5, and 6 a number of weeks ago now, and it says, be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. It talks about being full of grace. Let your speech be what? Seasoned with salt. When I speak to people, I want them to love it. When I am out in my cigar shop playing poker with the guys, which they still can't believe I say that in here, every week they go, seriously, do you tell your people? I go, yeah, they all know. And they're still there? I go, yeah. Yeah. When I'm with the guys, I'm with the guys. First of all, I don't let what they do offend me. And they will try to offend me to see if I'm offendable. They will. They'll do everything they can to offend me. I love them. Because when I'm with them one-on-one, suddenly I get to speak into their lives because now they want to be with me. Now they look for me when they come in a room. If you were to go into the cigar shop with me, we would go into the lounge and you would see everybody's head turn and go, hey, PD, Pastor Don. I'm PD to these guys. And usually there's somebody that's not met me and they go, he's a pastor? They go, yeah. See, be salt. Be a person who walks in the room And people say, I got to get more of that. I got to get more of him or her. There's something about them that I just love and that tastes so good. 80% of church likes the idea of sharing their faith. Only 61% it says 61% have not told another person about how to become a Christian in the past 6 months. If you're one of those who likes the idea of sharing your faith, but for some reason you've resisted doing it, look, you don't need an exhaustive knowledge of the Bible. You don't need some kind of perfect program where if you ask the right questions, you can kind of put them into the corner to make the decision you want them to make. Just ask these questions, you'll get them backed into this corner, and then boom! I've seen it happen. Not going to work. Maybe in some cases, but usually not. It's not a matter of just trying to do your Christian duty. And for the love of everything decent, it's not a matter of being weird. Seriously. See, sharing your faith begins with loving people. A few years back, I had a good friend of mine who wanted to hire me. He worked for Motorola. And I remember when we sat down, he wanted to hire me as a salesman. And he said, look, if I hire you, I got one rule. I said, what's that? He said, don't make a sale for a whole year. I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're hiring me to sell, but you don't want me to sell anything for a year? And so I asked him, why? He says, because I want you to just go out and know people. Just get to know them. Just make them your friends. Be friends with them. Don't sell them anything. He says, because if you really truly are a friend, when they need something, you know who they're going to turn to? You. So don't make a sale for a year. Just go and be with them, get to know them, take them to lunch. Thinking, this is a great job. At some point, I guess I would have to make a sale, but he said, for a year, that's all I want you to do. Can I just encourage you right now? Homework assignment. Go out and meet somebody. Okay? Make it your mission to meet somebody who's not in this room and who's not a Christian. Preferably the worst sinner that you could find anywhere. Go be friends. The big Harley riding, tobacco chewing, womanizing guy or girl. Go on out and meet them and see what happens. I remember a couple years ago, I'll close. A couple years ago, we had this thing at the church where we called it Harley, what was it? Hot Rod Harley Hamburger thing. It was the 3 H's. And we were going to serve free hamburgers if you brought in a hot rod or a Harley to our parking lot on a Saturday. We're cooking up these hamburgers. And some guy heard about it, and this huge group of Harley guys came in. Huge men. And 2 of them, there was one guy, he was here, and another guy was probably right about here. Big, Hispanic, rough looking. And I walked up to the shorter one, and he had a Raiders jersey on. And I said, are you a Raiders fan? He goes, yeah. I go, I hate the Raiders. And the big guy goes, whoa, 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 back up. And I said, you know what, I hate the Raiders so much that here's what I want to do for you. I happened to find a Raiders game helmet and 2 footballs signed by all the greats in the Raider organization, Kenny Stabler, and you name it. I'm going, and the guy's, all of a sudden, he's looking like a little kid. I go, you want them? I hate the Raiders. He goes, are you kidding me? I said, no. Literally, I do. I have this helmet. And he starts naming people. I go, yeah, I think that name's on there. Signed by all these people. I found the helmet in a trash can where it belonged. His name was Manuel. I heard from Manuel for a few years. I just love Manuel. I don't know what he's doing now. But see, just go out and meet somebody and love on them. Just get to know them. And then see what God does with it. But don't go out and then talk about having a parachute for a brain where it's no good unless it's open. So open your mind to hear what I'm about to tell you. Okay? Worship team, come back up. We'll close. But honestly, if you're one of those who believes that we should be out sharing the gospel, and yet you're also one of those that says, but I don't do it, then maybe this morning is a really good time for you to kind of reevaluate all of that and see that it doesn't take a rocket scientist. It just takes a willing person who says, I'm just going to love them. See what God does. It's not my responsibility to do anything more than that. I had, I'll share this. The Lord, I felt like the Lord kind of gave me a word this morning, and it kind of goes along with what other people shared, and it really is very important to somebody in this room. I don't know who it is. But I kind of grabbed a pen really quick, and it says that God says that you're amazing, that you're created just the way He wanted you. He loves you, and He loves everything about you, the good, the bad, the ugly. He loves you. And you know what? And He's calling you to come and know Him. And He's not calling you to be anything other than who you are, because He loves you. He's not calling you to a standard that you now have to live up to. He's calling you to Him. And so there's somebody here that I think, because Ed, you had the word. I think Carl said something about it. So if you're here and you're just feeling like, God would have nothing to do with me, it's not true. And so I really encourage you to come and know that, like that song we sang, your sin, not in part, but the whole, every single part of it, He nailed it to the cross so you don't have to bear it anymore. And you, like the hymn writer, can say, praise the Lord, oh my soul. My response will be, I can't believe how good this is. Amen?